My name is Martha, and I am 75 years old. For most of my life, I have been the backbone of my family. I worked 2 jobs while raising my son, David, alone after his father died in an accident when David was only 6. I sacrificed everything, my dreams, my youth, even my health, to make sure he had the life I never could. I thought my love and dedication were enough to secure a bond between us that nothing could break. But life has a cruel way of showing you who people truly are, especially when you are at your weakest. It was Thanksgiving, the holiday that used to be my favorite, the one where my house would smell of roasted turkey and cinnamon pies, where laughter filled the rooms and family gathered around the table holding hands. This time, the table was set in David's house, and the laughter was there, but not for me. As I walked into the dining room, leaning slightly on my cane, I heard his voice cut through the air like a knife. "This holiday's for family and friends, not caretaking," he said loud enough for the entire room to hear. His wife chuckled nervously, and his friends shifted in their seats, avoiding my eyes. I froze, my heart sinking, and asked softly, "David, what do you mean?"
He didn't even look at me.
"Mom, you're a burden.
You should understand by now.
You're not supposed to be here making things awkward." The room went silent. I felt my knees weaken, and for a moment, I thought I might collapse. My son, the boy I gave everything for, had just called me a burden. The shame and pain burned through my chest, but I forced a smile, nodded, and quietly walked out the door. No one followed me, not even David. That night, I sat alone in the guest room they had given me, staring at the walls that felt more like a prison than a home. Tears slid down my face as memories of my sacrifices played like a cruel movie. Every stitch I made to mend his school uniforms, every extra shift I took so he could go to college, every night I stayed awake nursing him through fevers, none of it mattered to him now. But as the clock struck midnight, something inside me hardened. If I was a burden, then I would free him of it. Not with tears or begging, but with silence and strength he never saw coming. The next morning, while the house was quiet, I took a deep breath, got dressed, and made my way to the study where the house deeds and car titles were kept. David had transferred everything to me years ago, saying, "Mom, this house is yours. You deserve security." I smiled bitterly at the thought. With trembling hands, I made a few calls to an old friend who worked in real estate. By afternoon, the papers were signed. The house he thought he owned?
Gone.
The cars he proudly showed off to his friends?
Sold.
I didn't take anything but my purse and the note I left on the kitchen counter. The note was short. "David, you called me a burden. I hope life without me feels lighter. When you wake up, this house and the cars won't be yours anymore. Happy Thanksgiving, Mom." I walked out the door without looking back. As I stepped into the cab that waited for me, I felt a strange mix of sadness and liberation. For the first time in years, I wasn't the one being left behind. I was the one walking away. What happened when David found that note changed everything, not just for him, but for me too. Because while he was celebrating with his friends, he had no idea what I had planned next. When David woke up the next morning, he expected to find me in the kitchen, maybe making coffee as I always did. Instead, he found silence. The coffee pot was empty, my room was bare, and on the counter, the note I had left stared back at him like a ghost. His eyes scanned the words again and again, his hands trembling. According to a neighbor who later told me, David stormed out into the driveway barefoot, only to find it empty. No cars, no mother, and soon, no house. The calls started pouring into my old flip phone. First it was David, then his wife, then his friends. I ignored them all. My friend Julia, the real estate agent, worked quickly. The house sale was already finalized. The buyers were moving in the next week. As for the cars, they were already sitting at a dealership lot by the time David figured out what had happened. Everything had been transferred legally. There was nothing he could do. You might be wondering, where did I go? I went back to where it all started, my childhood hometown, a quiet place where the air smelled of pine and the nights were filled with stars instead of city lights. Julia had also helped me secure a cozy cottage on the edge of town. It wasn't fancy, but it was mine. For the first time in a long time, I felt peace. But peace wasn't all I wanted. I wanted him to understand the pain he had caused me. In the first few days, I expected David to show up at my door, apologizing, begging for forgiveness. He didn't. Instead, he sent angry texts accusing me of ruining his life. "Mom, how could you do this? You've embarrassed me in front of everyone. They all know what you did." Each message cut deeper, but I didn't respond. I didn't need to. My silence was louder than any words I could say. Meanwhile, the town welcomed me back with open arms. Old friends came to visit, bringing pies and stories. I started attending church again, where people greeted me with warmth instead of whispers. I even joined a small knitting group, something I hadn't done since my youth. Slowly, I began to rebuild my life, not as someone's mother or caretaker, but as Martha, a woman who deserved respect. But David's anger didn't fade. One night, I heard a car pull up outside the cottage. My heart raced. I peeked through the curtain and saw his silhouette standing by the door. I hesitated before opening it, not knowing if he had come to make peace or to start a war. When I finally opened the door, his eyes were wild, his voice shaking. "How could you do this to me, Mom?" he demanded. "How could you do this to me, David?" I replied calmly. For a moment, he was silent, his jaw tightening. He stormed off without saying another word, leaving me trembling, yet strangely proud. That was the last time I saw him for weeks. But I knew this wasn't the end. Something told me he wasn't done with me yet. Little did I know, his next move would be something I never saw coming. He was about to cross a line that would change everything once again. If this story has touched you so far, let me know in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe so you won't miss the next part of this shocking journey. The morning after David's unannounced visit, I tried to go on with my day as if nothing had happened. I brewed tea, opened the curtains to let the sunlight in, and sat by the window to knit. But a heaviness hung in the air, as if a storm was brewing that only I could feel. My phone buzzed constantly, but I ignored it. I needed peace, not poison. Days passed quietly until one afternoon, as I walked to the local grocery store, I overheard two women whispering by the produce aisle. "Isn't she the one whose son lost everything?" One of them said, not realizing I was right behind her. "I heard he's furious. They say he's been telling everyone she's lost her mind." The other woman gasped. "Really? That's awful." My chest tightened. So that was his next move, destroy my name. I paid for my groceries and walked home slowly, trying to collect my thoughts. The son I had raised was now trying to paint me as unstable, as if my age made me weak. But he had forgotten who I was. I survived decades of hardship. I wasn't going to crumble over his lies. That evening, I received a call from Julia. "Martha, I think you should know," she said hesitantly. "David contacted the real estate office. He's claiming you were coerced into selling the house. He's trying to challenge the sale." My heart pounded. "Can he do that?" I asked. "Legally, no. The papers are ironclad, but he's trying to stir trouble." I thanked her and hung up, my hands trembling slightly. David wasn't just angry, he was plotting. My mind raced back to the last time I saw him at my door, his eyes full of rage. Something told me he wasn't finished, and the next step might not be as harmless as gossip. That night, I couldn't sleep. I double-checked the locks and sat by the window, watching the road. Hours went by, and just as my eyes began to close, I heard the faint sound of tires on gravel. My heart skipped a beat. A car slowly approached my cottage and stopped a few feet away. The headlights turned off, but no one got out. I stayed still, barely breathing, peering through the curtains. Minutes felt like hours until finally, the car drove away. The next morning, I found something chilling on my porch, a crumpled photo of me and David from years ago, torn in half. On the back, scrawled in black marker, were the words, "You'll regret this." I held the photo tightly, my hands shaking. This wasn't just anger anymore. This was a warning. But instead of fear, something fierce rose inside me. If he wanted a battle, I was ready. I called Julia again and said, I need to secure everything in my name. Not just the cottage, everything. And I need to move some funds where he can't touch them. She understood immediately. I'll handle it, she said. But Martha, be careful. Be careful. The words echoed in my mind as I sat by the window that evening. My son had turned into someone I barely recognized, someone capable of things I never thought he'd do. What was he planning next? And was I prepared to face it? The answer came sooner than I expected, in a way that shook me to my core. Because the very next day, I opened my door to find something far worse than a torn photo. The sun had barely risen when I heard a loud bang on my front door. My heart leapt into my throat. It wasn't the gentle knock of a neighbor or the soft tap of a delivery. It was forceful, angry. I hesitated before opening it, my hands trembling slightly. When I finally turned the knob, there was no one standing there. Just a small cardboard box sitting on the porch. I bent down slowly, my knees aching, and picked it up. The box was light, but rattled when I moved it. Taped to the top was a note in David's handwriting. Think twice before crossing me again. My stomach churned. I carried the box to the kitchen table, carefully opened it, and gasped when I saw what was inside. A collection of shattered picture frames, all containing photos of me and David through the years. Some were burned along the edges, others smashed to pieces. At the bottom of the box was a piece of my old scarf, torn and stained with something dark. I sat down hard, clutching the edge of the table to steady myself. The sun I had loved so fiercely had now crossed into darkness I could no longer deny. My hands shook, but my mind cleared. This wasn't just a family dispute anymore. This was a warning. And if I didn't act, things would escalate further. I called the sheriff's office to report the incident. The deputy who arrived was kind, but his words were little comfort. "We can't do much unless he actually harms you, ma'am," he said, his hat in his hands. "But keep your doors locked and call us if he comes back." After he left, I sat alone in my cottage, thinking. Waiting for something to happen was not an option. I had to get ahead of this. Over the next few days, I made quiet moves. I hired a security company to install cameras and stronger locks. I moved my savings into an account David couldn't touch, and with Julia's help, I updated my will, making sure every penny was protected from him. While I was at it, I reached out to an old friend, Claire, who worked in local news. I told her everything. "Martha, if he tries to ruin you, we'll make sure the truth comes out," she promised. But just as I was beginning to feel secure, something happened that shook me again. One night, as the rain poured outside and thunder rolled in the distance, my power suddenly went out. The cottage plunged into darkness. My heart raced. I grabbed a flashlight and crept to the window. Through the sheets of rain, I saw a shadowy figure standing near the edge of my property, watching. "David," I whispered to myself, my voice trembling. The figure didn't move, just stood there as the storm raged. I reached for my phone, but by the time I looked back, the figure was gone. The only sound was the rain hammering on the roof. The next morning, muddy footprints led from the edge of the property to my porch. My blood ran cold. I reviewed the security camera footage, but the storm had knocked out the system. It hadn't recorded a thing. Whoever had been there wanted me to know they could reach me at any time. I sat down, gripping my cane tightly, my mind swirling with fear and fury. Enough was enough. If David wanted to intimidate me, he was about to learn that his mother wasn't a woman to be scared into silence. I wasn't going to hide anymore. I began writing a letter that evening, one that would not only protect me but expose David's actions to everyone he cared about. But as I sealed the envelope, I heard the sound of a car pulling up outside. My heart pounded. Was it him again? Or someone worse? I peered through the curtain and saw headlights cutting through the darkness. The car door opened slowly, and a figure stepped out. My breath caught in my throat. Who was walking toward my door in the middle of the night, and what did they want? The figure in the darkness moved closer with each step, the rain glistening on their coat under the dim glow of my porch light. My grip on the cane tightened as my mind raced. Was it David? Or someone he sent? I felt my chest tighten with every second. When the figure finally stepped into the light, My heart skipped. It was not David. It was Claire, my old friend from the news station. She looked soaked, her umbrella broken from the storm, but her eyes burned with urgency. "Martha," she said breathlessly, "I didn't want to call. I needed to come in person." She handed me a folder, water dripping from its edges. "You need to see this. It's about David." I invited her in, and we sat by the fireplace as I opened the folder. Inside were printouts of social media posts, bank transactions, and screenshots of messages. Claire had done her digging. "He's been bragging to some of his friends online," she said, her voice low. "He's talking about taking back what you stole from him. He even hinted about teaching you a lesson." The words on the papers blurred as tears welled in my eyes, but they were not tears of fear. They were tears of rage. My son had turned into a man who would destroy his own mother to protect his pride. "Claire," I whispered, "I can't let this go on." She nodded, gripping my hand. "Then let's expose him. Let's show everyone who he really is." We spent hours planning. I told Claire everything from the Thanksgiving incident to the threats, the box of shattered photos, the torn picture on my porch. She recorded my story, promising to release it only if things got worse. "This will be your insurance," she said. The next few days, I kept to my routines, but my mind was sharper than ever. I cooked, I knitted, I even sang to myself while sweeping the floor, but I was preparing. I set up hidden cameras around my home, ones David wouldn't notice even if he came close. I also updated my letter, making copies to send to my attorney, the sheriff, and Claire. Then, one quiet afternoon, while I was watering my plants, I saw David's car creeping up the road. He parked at the edge of the driveway and stepped out slowly, his face hard and unreadable. "Mom," he called out, his tone deceptively calm. I stayed where I was, clutching the watering can like a shield. "What do you want, David?" I asked, my voice steady. "I just want to talk," he said, taking a step closer. "You've made your point, okay? Selling the house, the cars, you hurt me. But we can fix this. Just give me what's left. You don't need it." His words stung, but I kept my composure. "I don't need it? David, I earned everything I have. And I will never give it to someone who treats me like trash." His eyes darkened, and I could see the anger rising in him. He took another step forward, fists clenched. "You're making a mistake," he growled. Before I could reply, the sound of a car engine cut through the tension. Another vehicle pulled into the driveway. It was Julia, my real estate friend. She stepped out with a confident smile, holding a thick envelope. "Perfect timing," she said to me, then turned to David. "You might want to stay for this." David frowned, confused, as Julia handed me the envelope. Inside were final documents for another sale, an investment property I hadn't told him about. "It's done," she said to me with satisfaction. "You're untouchable now." David's face turned pale. "What is this?" he shouted. "You're ruining me." "No, David," I said calmly, meeting his eyes. "You ruined yourself the moment you called your own mother a burden." His breathing grew heavy, his hands trembling. I thought for a moment he might lunge at me, but instead, he stormed back to his car, slamming the door so hard the windows rattled. As he sped off, Julia placed a reassuring hand on my shoulder. "He's desperate," she warned. "Be ready. This isn't over." She was right. That night, my cameras captured something chilling. David sneaking onto my property with something in his hands. What he did next made my blood run cold, and I knew this war had only just begun. The footage from my hidden cameras played on the small screen in my living room, and my hands trembled as I watched it. The timestamp showed 2:17 a.m. David appeared on the screen, hood pulled over his head, moving like a predator in the night. In his hands, he carried a red gasoline can. My breath caught in my throat. He walked around the cottage slowly, pouring a line of gasoline along the edges of my garden and near the wooden porch. My heart pounded so hard I thought I would faint. He stopped, crouched, and struck a match. The tiny flame flickered, but before he could set anything ablaze, a bright light flashed. My new security system's floodlights roared to life, illuminating everything like midday. David froze, staring at the camera lens that glared back at him. His face was caught clear as day. He dropped the match, cursed under his breath, and sprinted back to his car, tires screeching as he sped into the darkness. I sat there in shock, clutching my chest. The boy I had once rocked to sleep had just tried to burn me alive. A tear slipped down my cheek, not from fear, but from a grief so deep it threatened to swallow me. But as I wiped it away, something inside me hardened. This wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about justice. The next morning, I called the sheriff. When the deputy arrived, I showed him the footage. He watched silently, his jaw tightening.
"This is serious, ma'am," he said.
"We'll issue a restraining order right away. But if you want my advice, don't wait for him to make his next move. Press charges." I nodded slowly. My heart hurt, but I knew what had to be done. I signed the papers and handed the footage over. That same afternoon, they went to serve David with the restraining order. But to my shock, they returned empty-handed. "He wasn't at his house," the deputy explained. "No one knows where he is right now." Fear crept back into my chest. If he wasn't at home, where was he? I double-checked my locks, closed the curtains, and called Claire. "You need to release the story," I said firmly. "The world needs to know who he's become." Claire didn't hesitate. "Consider it done, Martha." Within hours, my story was online. The video showed me, my voice trembling but strong, telling everything: how I raised David alone, how he called me a burden, how he tried to intimidate me, and finally, how he attempted to burn my home. The footage from the camera was included. The story spread quickly, and comments poured in. People were outraged. They called me brave. They called him a monster. That evening, my phone rang. It was an unknown number. I hesitated, but answered. A chilling voice hissed. "You think you've won? You've just made it worse." The line went dead. I stood frozen, my heart pounding. He was out there, watching, waiting. Julia came over that night to stay with me, refusing to let me be alone. But even with her there, I couldn't shake the feeling that David was close. Every rustle outside, every shadow, sent shivers down my spine. The next day, Claire called me with a trembling voice. "Martha, you need to see this." She sent me a link to a video posted anonymously online. My blood ran cold as I watched it. David was in the video, his face partially hidden by shadows, his voice low and venomous. "She thinks she can expose me? She thinks she can destroy me? Watch what happens next." The screen went black. I dropped the phone, my knees nearly buckling. David wasn't hiding anymore. He was promising something terrible. And I had no idea when or how he would strike. That night, as the wind howled outside, I sat by the fireplace with Julia. "He's not going to stop," I whispered. She nodded, her face pale. "Then we need to be ready, Martha. We need to end this before he does something you can't come back from." And just when I thought the night would pass quietly, we heard it, the crunch of footsteps on the gravel outside. Julia's eyes widened. We both stood frozen, listening as the steps grew closer, closer until they stopped right outside my door. I held my breath as the doorknob turned slowly. The doorknob twisted slowly, the metallic click echoing through the silent cottage. Julia grabbed my hand, her grip cold with fear. My heart pounded so loudly I could barely hear anything else. Whoever was outside wasn't knocking, they were trying to come in. I reached for the fireplace poker with my free hand, my fingers trembling as I wrapped them around the handle. "Who's there?" I shouted, my voice shaking yet fierce. The turning stopped. For a few seconds, there was only silence. Then, from the other side of the door, a voice I knew too well spoke. "It's me, Mom. Open up." "David." Julia's eyes widened, and she mouthed, "Don't." I took a deep breath and said through the door, "Leave, David. You're not welcome here." His tone changed, becoming more desperate. "Mom, listen to me. Please. I wasn't going to hurt you last night. I just lost control. Open the door so we can talk." I wanted to believe him. God, I wanted to believe him. But the memory of that gasoline can burned in my mind. "No, David," I said firmly. "You need to go." Suddenly, he slammed his fists against the door so hard it rattled. "You ruined my life. Do you understand that? You made me a joke to everyone. Open this door, or I swear." Before he could finish, Julia grabbed her phone and called the sheriff. "He's here," she shouted. "Hurry." Hearing her, David cursed and stormed away, his footsteps crunching angrily on the gravel. Through the window, I watched him disappear into the night. Minutes later, the deputies arrived, but he was long gone. They searched the area but found nothing except the muddy prints he had left behind. The sheriff himself came this time, his face grave. "Mrs. Martha, he's dangerous. We're issuing a warrant for his arrest. Until we find him, you need to stay somewhere safe." I shook my head. "I'm not running for my own son. This is my home." The sheriff sighed, but didn't argue. He left 2 deputies to patrol the area for the night. Julia stayed as well, refusing to leave me alone. We barely slept, jumping at every sound. The next morning, news of the video David posted had spread even further. My story was everywhere on local TV, social media, even national news outlets were picking it up. People were outraged on my behalf. Some sent messages of support, others offered to help however they could. The world was on my side, but I knew that would only enrage David more. By midday, Julia received a call from someone at the news station. "Martha, you need to sit down for this," she said, putting the call on speaker. The voice on the line was trembling. "We just got an anonymous package. It's a USB drive. On it is footage of David. He's not just threatening you. He's planning something big. He mentioned burning everything you own, even if it means taking you down with it." My stomach dropped. Julia covered her mouth with her hand. The caller continued, "We're turning this over to the police, but you need to be careful. He's not stable." As if the universe wanted to confirm their warning, that very evening, one of the deputies outside spotted movement in the woods near my property. They chased the figure, but he escaped into the darkness. The tension was unbearable. Every creak of the house made me jump. Later that night, I found something horrifying on my doorstep, a charred piece of wood, still smelling of smoke, with a single word carved into it: "Tonight." Julia gasped when she saw it. "Martha, we have to leave. He's coming back." But I stood still, staring at the burned wood. My fear transformed into something else entirely: anger. "No," I said coldly. "If he's coming tonight, then I'll be ready for him. I won't let him destroy me. Not this time." I began preparing the house, setting up the cameras, locking every window, and placing a small recording device by the door. Julia tried to argue, but I shook my head. "I need to end this, Julia. I need him to see the mother he underestimated." The clock ticked past midnight, and the air outside grew still. Too still. Then, the faint crunch of footsteps broke the silence. Through the window, I saw him, David, creeping toward the house with a crowbar in his hands. My heart pounded, but I stood my ground. The door handle rattled, then the sound of metal prying at the frame filled the air. I gripped the poker tightly, waiting. When the door finally burst open, David stepped inside, his face twisted with rage. "You should have stayed quiet, Mom," he snarled. But before he could take another step, the room flooded with blinding light, and the sheriff's voice boomed. "Freeze!" Deputies swarmed in from every side. David froze, dropping the crowbar. He looked around, stunned, as they cuffed him. Julia had secretly called the sheriff earlier and told him everything. As they dragged David out, he looked back at me, his eyes filled with a mix of hatred and something else: fear. I stood there, tears streaming down my face, but my voice was steady when I said, "You did this to yourself, David." As the police car disappeared into the night, I collapsed into Julia's arms. The nightmare was over, or so I thought, because the next morning, I received a letter from David's lawyer that left me speechless. The letter from David's lawyer lay on the table, its words burning into my mind like fire. Even from jail, my son was trying to fight me. The letter stated that David was contesting the sales of the house and cars, claiming I was mentally unfit at the time of signing the papers. He was accusing me of elder incompetence, trying to paint me as a senile old woman who had no idea what she was doing. My hands trembled as I reread the letter. After everything he had done, after trying to burn me alive, he still wanted to strip me of my dignity and everything I owned. Rage bubbled up inside me, but so did a strange calmness. He was desperate, and desperation makes people careless. Julia sat across from me, her eyes filled with fire. "Martha, he's grasping at straws. He has no case. We have footage, witnesses, everything. Don't let this shake you." I nodded, but a part of me knew David wasn't done. The legal battle was one thing, but his anger ran deeper. He was consumed by it, and I feared he would find another way to strike at me. The following days were a blur of meetings with my lawyer, gathering evidence and preparing for the worst. Claire continued to cover my story, and public support grew stronger. Messages of encouragement poured in. Strangers were offering to testify, to stand with me. The world was on my side, but David was still lurking like a shadow I couldn't shake. Then, one night, as I prepared tea in the kitchen, I noticed something strange. My front gate was wide open. I knew I had locked it. I stepped outside cautiously, my heart pounding. The yard was empty, but a piece of paper fluttered against the fence. I picked it up and froze. It was a photograph of me, taken through the window of my cottage. On the back, in jagged handwriting, it said, "You can't hide behind the law forever." Panic surged through me. If he was in jail, how could he have taken this? My mind raced with possibilities. Did he have someone working with him? A friend? Someone willing to do his dirty work? I immediately called the sheriff, who sent deputies to patrol the area again. They reassured me that David was still behind bars awaiting trial. "He couldn't have done this himself," the sheriff said. "But we'll keep an eye out." That night, I barely slept. Every sound outside made me jump. Julia stayed by my side, whispering, "He won't break you, Martha. You're stronger than him." I wanted to believe her. The next morning, as I sipped my tea with shaky hands, Claire called. Her voice was tense. "Martha, we just found something. One of David's friends has been making suspicious online purchases, things like burner phones, surveillance equipment. And there are messages between them. He's trying to intimidate you through someone else." My blood ran cold. David's reach extended beyond prison walls. This wasn't over. He was pulling strings from the inside. That evening, I decided I couldn't keep waiting for his next move. I gathered every piece of evidence, every photo, every recording, and delivered it personally to the sheriff's office. "If anything happens to me," I said firmly, "you know who's responsible." The sheriff promised to increase security and assured me they were closing in on his accomplice. But as I drove back to my cottage, my heart pounding with each mile, I noticed something unsettling. A black SUV had been following me since I left town. I turned down several roads trying to lose it, but it stayed close behind. My palms sweated as I gripped the wheel. Finally, I pulled into a public parking lot near a busy diner. The SUV stopped at the edge, its tinted windows hiding whoever was inside. I quickly went into the diner, my heart racing. The SUV drove away after a few minutes, but the fear lingered.
Someone was watching me.
When I returned home, Julia was waiting with worried eyes. "Martha, you look pale. What happened?" I told her everything, and she grabbed my hands. "You can't stay here anymore. It's not safe." But I looked around my little cottage, the only place where I felt free, and I shook my head.
"No, Julia.
I won't let them chase me away from my life. This is my home. And if they want to come for me, they'll find I'm not afraid." That night, I double-bolted the doors, turned on every light, and sat in my chair by the window with the poker by my side. I waited, every nerve on edge. Hours passed, the house silent except for the ticking clock. Then, just past midnight, my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. I opened it, and my breath caught. It was a live video feed of me sitting in my chair, staring at my phone.
Someone was watching me right now from outside.
I rushed to the window and peered out into the darkness. The yard was empty. The night was still. But the feeling of eyes on me was undeniable. I grabbed my phone, ready to call the police, when another message came through. The lights won't save you. At that moment, all the lights in the house flickered, then went out completely. The cottage was swallowed by darkness, so thick I could barely see my own hands. My breath came in shallow gasps as my fingers fumbled for the flashlight I kept by the chair. Julia, who had been asleep in the guest room, stumbled out, her voice trembling. "Martha, what happened to the lights?" Before I could answer, another message appeared on my phone, the screen glowing like a beacon in the dark. "You can't hide, Mom." Not anymore. My knees nearly buckled. It wasn't just David. He had someone working for him, someone close enough to cut the power. I switched on the flashlight, its narrow beam cutting through the gloom. "Julia," I whispered, "we have to stay calm. The police will come if we call." She nodded, gripping her own phone, but when she tried to dial, there was no signal. The power outage had somehow killed the service too. We backed toward the kitchen where the landline was. As I reached for it, the phone rang first, shrill and sudden in the silence. I froze. Slowly, I picked it up. A voice, distorted but unmistakable, whispered, "I warned you. Tonight's the night." The line went dead. Julia grabbed my arm. "We have to leave, Martha. We can't stay here." But as we turned toward the door, we heard it, the unmistakable creak of a footstep on the porch. Then another. The doorknob twisted slowly, just like the night David had come himself. I backed up, my flashlight shaking. The door rattled once, twice, then a loud crash shattered the silence as the door burst open. A tall figure in a dark hoodie stood silhouetted against the night. I couldn't see his face, but I knew this wasn't David. This was someone he had sent. The intruder stepped forward, gripping something metallic in his hand. I raised the fireplace poker, my heart pounding. "Get out of my house," I shouted, my voice echoing in the dark. He laughed low and cruel. "You should have stayed quiet, old woman." Before he could move closer, Julia grabbed a heavy vase from the table and hurled it at him. It smashed against his arm, and he stumbled. "Run," she screamed. But I didn't run. Instead, I swung the poker with every ounce of strength I had. It hit him square in the shoulder, and he cried out in pain, dropping the metal object. The flashlight beam flickered over it. It was a crowbar. My heart raced as he scrambled, but I swung again, catching his leg. Julia grabbed the crowbar and pointed it at him. "Get out, or I swear you'll regret it," she yelled. The intruder backed toward the door, clutching his arm. "This isn't over," he growled before disappearing into the night. Moments later, red and blue lights flashed outside. The deputies had finally arrived. They combed the area but couldn't catch him. "We'll find him," one officer said, but his tone was grim. I showed them the messages, the video feed, everything. They confirmed the cameras had been tampered with. Whoever was helping David was skilled. As they secured the house, the sheriff pulled me aside. "Mrs. Martha, we've been monitoring calls from David's jail. He's been communicating through coded messages. This attack was orchestrated by him." Hearing that sent chills down my spine. "Then why is he still in jail?" I asked angrily. The sheriff looked away. "For now. But his accomplices are dangerous, and we believe they're planning something bigger." After the deputies left, Julia and I sat in silence, shaken to the core. My cottage, once my safe haven, now felt like a battlefield. I didn't sleep that night. I sat by the window, watching the shadows, gripping the poker in one hand and my phone in the other. By morning, a new message appeared, this time with a picture of my cottage taken just before sunrise. "You won this round, Mom. But soon, you'll have nothing left to fight with." I showed it to Julia, my hands trembling. "He's escalating," she whispered. I nodded, my eyes burning with tears and fury. "Then it's time I end this, Julia. I won't wait for him to strike again. I'll finish it my way." I called my lawyer and told him to move forward with something I had been quietly preparing. The transfer of all my remaining assets into a trust David could never touch, along with a public declaration that would ruin his schemes forever. But I had one more plan, one final move David would never see coming. That night, as the wind howled outside, I packed a small bag. Julia watched me, worry etched into her face. "Martha, what are you doing?" I looked at her with a calm she didn't expect. "I'm ending this war. On my terms." The next morning, I walked into the county courthouse with my lawyer at my side, my head held high. Cameras flashed, reporters shouted questions. And then, as I prepared to step inside, a voice from the crowd called out my name. I turned and saw David, standing there, free, his eyes burning with hate. The sight of David standing there, free and furious, froze me in my tracks. My heart thudded so hard I could feel it in my throat. He was supposed to be in jail, but here he was, surrounded by the chaos of flashing cameras and curious onlookers. The sheriff rushed to my side, his hand on his holster. "We had to release him on bail," he said quickly. "But stay close to us." David stepped forward, his lips curling into a smirk. "Look at you, Mom," he spat. "You think you're untouchable because you've got the media on your side? You're old, weak, and pathetic. This ends today." I held my head high, refusing to let him see me shake. "No, David. It ends today because I'm taking back everything you tried to destroy." My voice was steady, and for the first time, I felt power in my words. We entered the courthouse, the tension so thick it was hard to breathe. Inside, the judge presiding over the case looked stern, tired of the drama that had unfolded around my family. David's lawyer tried to argue that I was mentally unfit to handle my own affairs, but I sat there calm and collected, letting my attorney present the mountain of evidence we had gathered. The courtroom watched in silence as the footage played, the attempted arson, the messages, the threats, the break-in by his accomplice. Gasps filled the room as David's true nature was laid bare. My lawyer ended with a powerful statement. "This is not a case of an elderly woman losing her mind. This is a case of a mother defending herself from her own son's cruelty." David stood, his face red with anger. "She's lying. She's manipulating all of you," he screamed. But the judge banged the gavel sharply. "Sit down, Mr. Collins. The evidence speaks for itself." After hours that felt like years, the judge delivered the verdict. The court finds no evidence of incompetence. The property sales were legal and final. Furthermore, due to the threats and attempted harm, a permanent restraining order is issued against Mr. Collins, and charges for attempted arson and conspiracy remain active. David's jaw dropped. He slammed his fists on the table, shouting, "You can't do this to me." Deputies moved in quickly, restraining him as he fought against their grip. "You'll regret this, Mom. You'll regret it," he yelled as they dragged him out of the courtroom. The room was silent except for my slow, steady breathing. Tears streamed down my cheeks, not of sadness, but of release. I had won, not just the case, but my freedom from the chains of his manipulation. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed me, but I spoke clearly into the cameras. To every mother, every grandmother who's ever been treated as a burden, you are not weak. You are not worthless. Stand your ground. Protect your dignity, because you deserve to live with pride. The crowd erupted in applause, and for the first time in years, I felt alive. In the days that followed, David was transferred back into custody to face additional charges. His accomplice was arrested soon after, confessing everything under pressure. The threats stopped. The fear lifted. My story spread far and wide, touching the hearts of strangers who reached out to thank me for my courage. Julia stayed with me during those weeks, helping me rebuild the sense of peace I had lost. The cottage became warm again, filled with laughter and light. One afternoon, as we sipped tea by the window, she smiled at me. "You did it, Martha. You fought back and you won." I looked out at the garden, blooming brighter than ever. "No, Julia," I said softly. "We won, because love and strength will always defeat hate." The sun dipped low, painting the sky in shades of gold and red, and for the first time in a long time, I felt truly at home. David was no longer my shadow. He was a lesson, one that reminded me never to underestimate my own strength. My story ends here, not with bitterness, but with a heart that finally knows peace. If my journey has touched you, if it reminded you that even in the darkest times you can rise, then please like, comment, and subscribe. Your support keeps stories like mine alive, and maybe, just maybe, it will help someone else find their strength too.